Can you, I just have to find the, you know, so that I'm on the YouTube. I just have to log into Bay Street YouTube. Is that what I have to do?
No, you need to log in as Bay Street in your Gmail account.
Oh, okay. Is that what we have to do?
Yeah. Because then it knows that you are, or you can, like once you are.
Okay, okay, yeah, it's a card stock
14 or
is it is the card stock 2014 for Bay Street?
Yeah. No caps. All
Okay. Okay, now what do I do? Now in here, do I?
Now you go to Google, so YouTube. Now you are logged in.
Okay, so I just go to YouTube.
Yeah, on File, New tab or something, or you can do it here from YouTube.
Where, oh, there. Okay, yeah. Okay, and there we are. And then now, okay, so now I'm here with now I have my chat, right? No, oh no.
You go to live. You go to your YouTube again. Okay, you say upload. Right hand side. And then you go to
live streaming.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay. Okay, good. They can see us already, Satinia. Okay. So hi, Mary and Satinia, and we're going to be. I tried contacting you so that later we can have you on the screen, and so that you'll be able to talk to us via. What are we going to be doing? Using Google Chat. Google Chat. So Riaz will try to chat you from there. Okay. So welcome everybody again. Sorry we're late again, but we're all here. And I hope that everybody had an opportunity to think of some ideas to pitch. Because there's so many of us and we don't have that much time, when we come to that section this morning, try to be as succinct as possible. 2 minutes. I'm going to cut you off after 2 minutes with presenting your idea. Okay, so you can think about it, but before we get into that section where people are pitching ideas and getting feedback, I'm going to ask Ron to. I'm going to ask Ron if he would do a little bit of a presentation on knowledge mobilization. So, take it away, Ron.
So I won't even attempt, but I figured out what I was doing wrong yesterday. I guess I was pressing that little wheel thing on the tracking wheel, and that was closing things as opposed to right-clicking or left-clicking the mouse. So I thought of that last night, and I thought that, maybe I'm not the best person to talk about some of this stuff, technical stuff. But I'm a guy with ideas, and I guess that's what's made me the filmmaker that I am. So knowledge mobilization, just so you understand the concept or where it comes from, but I want to talk to you about it in terms of the way that you apply it to what you do. So knowledge mobilization comes from the funding agencies, the academic funding agencies in Canada, primarily the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. And basically, the problem with academics in the past and in the present, and hopefully not so much in the future, is that we produce whatever we produce, books and articles, for a very limited number of people. I've written a few books and I've published lots of articles and all of that. And everything I've done in my academic career, everything I've written has not been read by as many people who have seen probably the worst film that I ever produced. right? Because it was very specific. It was aimed at academics. It's not for the casual reader. I have to prove myself. I have to prove that, you know, I know something about history and all the rest of it. So this is the problem of the funding agencies. It's Canadian taxpayers who contribute to the funds, and Canadian taxpayers want to know what we're doing. And so they've put an emphasis, and in all of our applications we have to come up with a section on knowledge mobilization. How are we going to take this egghead speak and relate it to the ordinary people, ordinary Canadians, so they can understand what we're doing and what their money's paying for? And so there's a lot of ways of doing it, right? There's lots of websites. You can hold a conference. I happen to be able to make documentary films or work with film and video and do projects like that. But there are a number of different things, art installations. There's a whole wide variety of things that you can do for knowledge mobilization. Now, I can only speak as a historian, so I'll just tell you a little bit about sort of what we do as historians and how the world is changing. Originally, I thought, when I started looking at this, that this is a great idea, and I'm sure all of my colleagues will understand, like I do, that this is a great idea, and that there'd be work for filmmakers here in Thunder Bay and across the country, sort of publishing in a different form the research results of not only historians, but everybody across the social sciences and humanities and into the sciences. I even, with Amit, we tried to get something off the ground that was going to be research TV, so that you'd be able to go on the internet and, if you're into Shakespeare, everything on Shakespeare, but, with peer review, so it wasn't just, somebody's idea of what was good about Shakespeare, but we'd have it vetted by professionals, and it would be a great thing. Well, we couldn't get any money for it, so it doesn't exist. But the idea was to create a space where people could get information, because people use it in classrooms, and that's my knowledge mobilization. So what do historians do? Well, basically, my job is to read other people's mail and dig through their personal items and tell stories about those people or those events. That's what I do. History is reading other people's mail. And traditionally, historians and history begins with the written word, right? There's prehistory, but when you have written documents, newspapers, letters, all of those kinds of things being produced, that is where history sort of begins for historians. And traditionally, we would dig up in archives documents between, different government ministries or whatever it was, and we would dust them off. They hadn't been seen in a long time, and we would analyze them, and we would offer, hopefully, a new or a different interpretation to events in the past. And so the first phase is the documentation, finding the documentation, and it was always just the printed word. Then it's a question of interpretation. So as a historian, trained the way I am to look at various things and using various theories, I can offer an interpretation of those documents, which might be a lot different than what, say, the Toronto Sun would report on an event, right? And then the output was books and articles and maybe conferences and, very importantly in the classroom, teaching new generations of historians to do exactly what I had learned to do. And it just sort of it was a sort of self-perpetuating kind of system. Then, came along new technologies. So the camera and photography, and then film, and then audio, and then video, and the digital world and the internet and social media and all of these kinds of things. So my work or my job has kind of changed, because the documents I use now, depending how far you go back, right? I don't do Greek history or Roman history. I don't. My history is very contemporary history, so basically 20th century. I like to tell people that I do history post the invention of the typewriter, because I can't imagine spending my life sort of deciphering what somebody wrote in the 15th century by hand with whatever style of writing they had and the words they used. Once they invented the typewriter, everything becomes clear, right? There are typos and all of that, but I can read the stuff and I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure things out. So I do post-typewriter history, and along with the invention of the typewriter, you had the introduction of these new technologies. And in the 20th century, or starting in the 19th century, you have photography. And then at the beginning of the 20th century, you have the film element. And then in about 1930, the introduction of sound and film, so picture and sound. And then around the 1970, you started seeing video production, so a different kind of production. And then in 1995, you have the internet, and then since about 1997, you have social media. And there's a lot of other different forms of documentation that have been created or are being created. And my new challenge as a historian is to interpret all of these things and incorporate them. So my work basically relies an awful lot on stock footage and audio recordings from the past and photographs and all kinds of different things that I incorporate into my interpretation. And the difference on the other end in terms of my publication is I still publish books and articles and all of that, but if I'm going to get money to do what I want to do, I have to do this knowledge mobilization thing. And I'm not saying that as though it's a burden, but it's something I have to do. And actually I prefer to do that than the other stuff because it's a lot more creative and the boundaries are much broader than publishing a book and jumping through the hoops of convincing people, an editorial board and all of those kinds of things. It's much easier for me to have my freedom and go wherever I want on the map with my film projects. And so the output on the other end is a variety of things. I've put together websites, documentary films, some sort of experimental kinds of things. And I'm sort of open to anything that I can do with the materials that I have. That help regular people who aren't trained in history and don't really need to know all the mumbo jumbo of theory understand what happened and how things work. And so my world has changed quite a bit. Unfortunately, for many people in my field and across the social sciences and humanities, the world hasn't really changed. They still find bits of paper someplace as historians. They still interpret those in traditional ways, and the product is inevitably a book or an article that 3 people read, and it gets reviewed in a couple of journals, and then people talk about it as though they know what's in it without ever really having read it, and it sort of perpetuates itself. So that's sort of where I am. Now, the other thing that you have to appreciate is that history as a field also underwent fundamental change in about the 1960s. And nothing sort of happens overnight. It's history. Everything has a history. But about in the 1960s, we started seeing people's history or social history emerge. That was, it occurred at the same time that we saw, the rise of feminist scholarship, in a very big way across the academic field. And so there were all of these new approaches to history. It wasn't just dry, history about important men. And sometimes their wives, who did important things and made the world, move from one stage to the other. Instead, we started looking at people on the street and, ordinary people. We invented, I didn't invent it, but we, historians invented oral history. We took the big leap of taking a tape recorder and interviewing people who were actually there and who experienced things. So we went into factories and interviewed workers. And we didn't interview the bosses. We interviewed the workers, and we said, what's your day like? What's your life like? Where do you live? How much do you make? What are your challenges for your family? And this whole social history movement began, and it's still with us today. And from that, of course, people started taking the same microphones into a variety of different venues and places, etc., and collecting all of that material. And so today, in the archives at Lakehead University, there are a number of interviews from the 1970s with labor leaders at the Lakehead. There are, people had Super 8 cameras and recorded, well, maybe just Christmas,
But they also tended to take it to, you know, big events, right? The new mayor being installed or whatever was going on in town. And those things, if they haven't been thrown out, sometimes find themselves their way into the archive. And just, we're in the middle of something now, so you're all sworn to secrecy, because if Dougal Media ever finds out about it, they're going to shut everything down because they're a corporate entity.
Well, you're streaming live, just so you
I am.
know.
Anyhow, they gave the nightly news for Thunder Bay, right, and region, from 1958, when they started their television station. And it's all on 16mm film, nightly news till the mid-1970s. And so I talked to the curator at the museum, and he's a more traditional guy, Tori, if you're listening, than I am. And basically, you know, the comment that he said was, well, there's no sound. It would be much more valuable if there was sound. Okay, but we had newspapers. And you all know that whatever you see on the nightly news tonight, you just have to buy the paper tomorrow morning and you're going to get the story. So even if the sound on your TV is busted, you've got the images, and then you can read the newspaper and you can figure out what happened. So, you know, combining those two media, in essence, what we're going to do is be able to look back at key events in the history of Thunder Bay. And we'll have the footage to go with it, and then it's a matter of figuring out what to do with it, how to construct whatever it is that we're going to construct with it, whether it's an installation, whether it's it doesn't matter what it is. So in my lab, we built the Kelly Cine, which is, you know, to transfer this stuff. And we've got a project working with them. But, you know, think of the applications. And these, you know, nothing radical about it, but we have a sports hall of fame. And Thunder Bay is known for all of its hockey players. Well, every one of those guys, every time they won a Stanley Cup, they showed up with that thing in Thunder Bay and walked around town. And I guarantee that the nightly news, because you've seen the nightly news in Thunder Bay, there is no news in Thunder Bay, followed those people around. So just for the Sports Hall of Fame, right, we can provide them with all kinds of images and stories and, you know, whatever it is. And then there are all the other issues. So you just have to look at history and what was going on in the world. The War Measures Act. I'm sure somebody went out on the street in October 1970 around here to report on any radical activity that was taking place in Thunder Bay. And I'm sure in front of the main post office there was a soldier posted perhaps to protect it, or, you know, there was extra surveillance, but we had to do something for the War Measures Act. It'll be there, in images at least. We have to decipher it and see what it all means, and, you know, that's another level of things. But those materials exist. So across sort of northwestern Ontario, but around the world, you know, there are these bits of information. It's a question of being able to collect those media and interpret them and then do something else with it. All of that is knowledge mobilization. So for you folks who aren't professional historians, what you're doing is knowledge mobilization as well. If you're going to make a film or you're going to make do anything with what you learn here today, you're going to be mobilizing knowledge in some way. And so I think, you know, if there's something that you need to appreciate and take away, it is that you are transmitting, interpreting and transmitting knowledge to other people. And the key to it, for me, is to identify who my audience is, just as you have to identify who your audience is going to be. And it can be an audience of one, it can be an audience of millions. We all dream that, you know, whatever we produce will magically, you know, go viral on the internet or something like that, and will be big hits and maybe make lots of money at it. That's not the reality for 99.9% of us. But whatever you have can and will have some impact somewhere. So it's kind of like going out, I suppose, hunting. You know, you can fire the gun in any direction, but unless you've got, you know, something targeted, you're not going to kill anything. So, you know, you have to sort of target an audience with what you're doing and know what it is you're sort of hunting, and produce what they will be interested in. So yesterday I talked about engaging the world, right? A key element in that was to, you know, attract young people who have a limited attention span to very, very big issues that concern us all. It's one planet, and if we mess this one up, there's nowhere else to go, right? So international development affects all of us, and the, you know, it's the younger generation. That's my target audience generally, are younger people, because after they're about 21 years old, you can't get through. You know, the thickness of their skulls increases sort of exponentially after about 21 years. So, you know, I try to produce things that can get into the classroom, to those young minds. And I'm there, I'm there to have an impact on those young minds. Because I know that when I'm in a senior's home, those are the guys that are going to be making the decisions. And I'd like to think that I've given them a little bit of something to think about, so that, they don't all vote for euthanasia for people of my age or something like that. But, it's a question of who you target. And I'm an academic, so I also produce products for the classroom. That's my knowledge mobilization. So, I don't make films that are very long, because I know that we've got 50 minutes to spend in an ordinary class. So if you make a 55-minute film, students start leaving after about 50 minutes or 45 minutes because they've got to catch a bus or something like that, you've lost them. So you have to produce something that you can show in that time frame, right? And hence, with engaging the world, those little snippets, they can endure 3 minutes of something they don't care about. And they don't even have to participate in the discussion or even have learned anything from it, but they're there, and perhaps later on, when on their way home, or at the bar or wherever they are, they might reflect on it, and we might score even after the game is over, as it were, right? So, so that's knowledge mobilization in a nutshell. And then if you look at what I've done for documentary film, with a few exceptions, where I was maybe having fun, more fun, or not documentary necessarily, but where I was having fun, all of them target that particular kind of age group, right? I made a film about barbed wire. And, it's not about it's about barbed wire, but it begins in the West, the Great Plains, with the introduction of barbed wire, and who were the first people to get pricked by it? Well, First Nations. All of a sudden they couldn't go to the watering hole or pick medicinal plants or whatever they did down the road. They had to go all the way around it, and the first thing you know, there was no place for them to go. And then we went through the First World War, the Second World War. We went to Israel and the West Bank and the border wall. Not the border wall,
The wall.
the wall. Then we went to the Mexico-U.S. border and the border wall. Ended up in Louisiana State Penitentiary, where they got lots of barbed wire, but it's not barbed wire anymore, it's laser wire. And, the idea was I was hoping, because one time I was in Costa Rica, and there was a guy that had an outdoor garage. It was like a cage, for lions or something. It was, and they had barbed wire and everything about it, and he'd lock his car in there and, lock it in so that nobody could steal his car. But it was beautiful because it was barbed wire and big steel bars and everything. And I was looking for that. I didn't have the money to go back to Costa Rica to find that lovely little garage kind of thing. But, that's our society. And if you look for barbed wire, you'll see it everywhere and in the strangest places, around churches and, places, who knows why they need a barbed wire protection. And from barbed wire, I took it to, I did other films and did other things. But, it was designed so that it could be cut up into short pieces so that you could use it in history classes, because that's what it is. And it's not just a history of the Great Plains or the history of Native people and their relationship to barbed wire. It's a history of all of us worldwide, and our relationship to a very simple scientific innovation from the 1860s, and how it's impacted and changed our lives forever. And so that is the kind of knowledge mobilization that I do. And the objective is always for younger people and a few older ones, because not everybody, above 21 is, over the hill or you can't reach. But mainly, I try to hit that demographic because that, it seems to me, if you're going to make change or, do something for change, why preach to the converted or those that really don't want to hear your message? You have to scream that much louder. Whereas with young people, there are subtle ways of getting in. And then, of course, the trick is that you can't go overboard with your radicalism, because it won't get into schools. You have to figure out how to get under the censorship curtain, right, and into schools to get to them. So, I've been criticized with a few of my projects for not, being radical enough. It's fairly radical stuff, but, why do 14-year-olds need to see dead bodies, right? Like, does that really, and, if you're prevented from showing it to them because you're showing, some kind of violence or something like that, what's the point, right? The few people that really want to emphasize that particular part of history aren't going to pay any attention to you anyhow. And it's the young people that you can subtly bring into, a more activist frame of mind. So that's what knowledge mobilization is, but you should think in terms of what you're doing as knowledge mobilization as well. How are you mobilizing, making that knowledge, get out there? And like I said, I've published lots of books, really good stuff. You can buy them cheap on Amazon because they're all on sale because nobody reads them. And they're in libraries and things like that, and some poor students are sometimes forced to read them. But the films, Kelly and I made one called Banana Split, and every so often there's a crisis in the banana world. They tell you it's the end of the world. You'll never get the Cavendish banana again. It's going to be wiped out. And the blip on our little Vimeo site just goes like this. Somebody remembers the film, sees the film, and the first thing you know, a new generation, because generations of activists are only, an activist generation is maybe 5 years. And then they get ties and jobs and they move on. So there's this little sort of moving thing. So about, every couple of years, there's a new group of people that discover an old film and they kind of go crazy over it for a week. And then it goes down, but it's thousands of hits on, on Vimeo. It just sort of peaks like this, and then they realize that there's 1,000 kinds of bananas. You don't have to panic. They'll find something else to replace it, and it's probably a good thing if that kind of banana hits the road because, they're spending, thousands and thousands of dollars per acre every year to put pesticides and herbicides on it that's not good for you anyhow. And they cost next to nothing. It's slave labor that picks it, and there's alternatives to it. Anyhow, that's the kind of thing that I do, and that's knowledge mobilization. I think I did it in about 20 minutes. So thank you very much. Yes, the young man in the front.
Thank you, the young man. Now, when you're going through the whole academic dance to get grants, how do you communicate who your audience is? How do you convince them that you're going to have an audience? Because I think this would translate into information for all of us. If we're going to be applying for grants, they're always asking you, who's your audience, right?
Well, it's not, you talk about who would potentially want to see the product. And it's very easy for me because the fact that I'm getting a grant to make the film means that I'm not getting paid for it. I can't get the grant money and pay myself, right? So there's no income, there's no benefit in it for me. And I suppose, I could print up copies and sell them to people. And I do sell some of it, right? Because it's, we have a company and the company has to continue functioning and that sort of thing. But there's no money in it. And so I have the freedom of saying that it's going to be on the internet and it's going to be available for free, and that means that there are 4 billion potential viewers for what I have to do. The other thing is that because I'm an academic, I look for like conferences or places it might be used in classrooms, etc. And I have a bit of a track record now for doing that kind of thing, so it's maybe a bit easier for me. We just finished a project on the giant mine in Yellowknife. And the way it came together was that there's a couple of guys in Newfoundland, and they've been looking at it's a project called Toxic Legacies. They've been looking at the 8,000 toxic sites in Canada that are monitored by the federal government, not the 22,000 total toxic sites in Canada that, many of them are not being monitored by the government or not having become the federal responsibility. A lot of them are old mine sites. And anyhow, they wanted to do something about the giant mine, 237,000 tons of arsenic trioxide that has to be frozen in perpetuity. And there was a filmmaker in Yellowknife, a friend of ours, and with Kelly, I became the producer, they became the filmmakers, and the funding came from a couple of guys in Newfoundland, Arn, John, hi. But they needed, for their project, to do the bigger thing that they were doing, they needed a knowledge mobilization component, and I provided it. So I was sort of a hired gun of sorts, right, to pull together the team and all that. And more people are thinking in those terms, academics, but it's a hard sell because they apply for, I don't know, $200,000 and they have to give the filmmakers, $75,000 or something like that, or $50,000 or $40,000 maybe for a website, whatever it is. It's hard for them to digest that. They'd rather just spend it all on their own stuff, right? So very few academics have the skills or the access to equipment that I have because you're sitting in it. I have access to all of this. I don't have like overhead and all of those kinds of things. But I'm not in competition outside of that academic realm using all of these advantages, right? When I go to the Ontario Arts Council, I have a little bit of, you know, my past and that sort of thing. But it is a question of just identifying as much as you can an audience and making it as broad as possible. And who knows who's going to watch whatever you have to offer. But don't target the groups that can use it most. So if you're working with homeless people in Toronto, there are homeless people everywhere. And so it's whoever works with them, because by definition, they don't have televisions or the internet necessarily, but whoever works with them, all of those, you know, shelters or wherever, organizations that work with homeless people everywhere can use the film that is being produced, and that's your target audience. And you know, you don't use the term knowledge mobilization. They won't know what that is. Use a euphemism, right? You know.
Yeah, and you get those films in not only in university libraries, but also in like in public libraries. They you know, I have a friend that she's not even a professional filmmaker, but she dealt a lot with bullying, and she made a small film about it, and now it's all over the libraries in Canada, and also the US was interested because there was no little film that really addressed in an educational approach these issues. So there's a very interesting market that libraries, universities, and
It's not
of course online. But I'm talking about even the
But it's not lucrative. But
Yeah.
you know, it's Canada. They make their money-making film by making films, not selling the product, right? So you have to get those grants from the Arts Council or the other funding agencies, anywhere you can get corporate sponsorship, that sort of thing, and that's how you feed yourself, and the product can go to these different outlets.
And if I can mention another thing, just for example, because of the internet and the possibility to have so much video on sites today, so there are organizations that are interested in expanding their content. So you know, if you're, I know about all kind of health and social organizations that now are working with filmmakers or people that are involved in media and creating little films that are going to be on their websites. It was never an opportunity for them before to have control of their own content. So there's a lot of things going on right now, not necessarily with always professional filmmakers, that everybody's using media,
Can I just say the film on homeless folks that we made, What World Do You Live In? We recently were invited to show at a radical film festival in Glasgow, and they arranged that we showed it in a center for people dealing with mental health issues. And so, some of the people there started tweeting the people at the sanctuary in Toronto, and so they created their whole sort of audience connection outside of us when we just sort of presented the film. So they just kind of took it away, which is sort of like what he's saying. So if you connect with the people who are really interested in the film, then they make it.
They become promoters.
And I always include something about giving it back to the people who are really the people who make the film. It's the people that are in the film, but going back to the communities, right, and giving it back to them, so that there's some feedback. In academic terms, that's really important because these are the subjects, and they like it or dislike it, and they tell me that helps me grow. Shelley?
Okay, and I'm reporting in for our long distance participants. Okay, so first a comment, oops, I just gotta go down here, from Mary Chakasim, who's in Moosonee, and she has been participating all since yesterday. Anyway, she just had a comment on your earlier talk, which was that historians didn't invent oral history, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, but have consistently kind of disregarded it, and you need a different name for the evidencing of verbal accounts.
Yeah, well, oral tradition and oral history are different things, right? Formal history is oral history, but oral tradition is very, very important. And she's absolutely right. It's been ignored, and still is ignored. But those are the kinds of sources of documentation that are gaining more, credibility and respect, I suppose, in academic circles, but it's just recognizing the fact that they exist and have always existed. The film we made on the giant mine, the question was, how do you tell, because arsenic is like nuclear waste, it's there forever. You have to freeze it forever. And so the question is, how do you tell people in, say, 5,000 years not to dig there? Because if they dig and they release it, it's enough arsenic to kill everybody on the planet a couple of times over. And then you also have to think about who's going to be there in 5,000 years. Well, the Dene, who we work with, have been there for 10,000 years, and they expect to be there for another 10,000 years. The non-Dene population arrived in the 1940s, more or less, and they could just easily tomorrow, not that easily, but they could pack their bags and leave, but that's the Dene's home, right? Their homeland, and it's their home. So the simple answer is, because you can't leave a message in English, you can't sort of predict that maybe the Chinese will be overrunning the place and write it in Chinese. You can't use symbols, because what means don't touch now might mean, dig and enjoy in 10,000 years. So what is it? It's oral tradition. So the answer in that film is simply that the Dene are creating a new story of the giant mine, and it's a very simple story. There's a monster underground, and you have to leave it underground, because if it ever gets out, it'll kill everyone. And that's the way they, as a traditional people, see being able to convey the message into the future. But when you think about it, that validates all of their tradition, right? Because they have their own understanding of how they came to be the Dene, and they came to be in that particular part of the world. And it's a big conflict between sort of the white settlers in Yellowknife and the Dene, because they want proof that they own the land. They want proof that they were on the land, and what the Dene have are stories about, their ancestors and creation, and how the lake came to be, and how the rock formations came to be, and all the rest of it. So this little exercise validates everything that they've always been saying. Right, so it's an interesting thing. So Mary's absolutely right, and depending on the subject that you're looking at, you have to dig deep.
Okay, and we have one more question, but you have to answer it very quickly,
Okay.
because we're going to move on. From Satinia, so are the films created more as an avenue to share research with the general public than with the academic community? So when you're talking about films for knowledge mobilization.
Well, Satinia and everyone else, the fact is the academics for the most part won't pay much attention to film. It's ephemeral for them. It'll go in one eye and out the other. The films are created for consumption by the general public and reaching people that in a different kind of way with information that is academically sound, right? Research that has been done. So academics will use it because they're always looking for a way to get out of a lecture. So if you provide them with a 45-minute film, then that's great. The couple of minutes introduction, maybe a question or two at the end, and everybody goes home, and that's one less class that they have to teach. But for the people who watch it, right, the students and the public, it can last a lot longer than that 45 minutes. That's it.
Okay, so.
Thank you, Satinia.
So anyway, so what we're going to do now is, sorry, I'm trying to do a million things here, but just so you can see me. Hi, everybody. Anyway, okay, it's a little kooky looking, but anyway, so what we're going to do is we'll have this little pitch session, and then we have Rebecca and Amit and Edie can give some commentary and back, and just on some practical advice on how you would, and especially if it was going to be a larger project, how you would maybe just some information on writing proposals, how you put together, how you're going to be able to move forward with that project, what kind of research you might want to do, and then also just a few comments on filming ethically and all of those kind of the issues that come up, especially if you're doing something like a documentary. Well, almost anything, really. There's all kinds of permissions and challenges and things that you have to think about, because it is all about relationships and storytelling and who's telling the story. So, who would like to start today? Oh, Shirley? Okay.
I've spoken, I think.
And introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
At lunchtime, I spoke to you yesterday. So the history of the bridge, the swing bridge, which had the fire, and why they're not fixing it or haven't fixed it yet. But also, why is it important for both sides? Because everybody says, oh, well, the First Nations can't get over, and there's so many accidents because of that, because going on the other side. But nobody's really, it is history. It is part of our history for the whole of Thunder Bay, not just because you can get to First Nations and get cheap gas, although that is my reason. But like, why should it be important for the rest of Thunder Bay? And I thought like getting a picture and maybe photoshopping it back to what the bridge looked like way back in the day, and then like doing that kind of merge thing that they showed where then it goes back to what shape it is in now. And it is in pretty bad shape. And it was in pretty bad shape even before the fire happened. I mean, it was kind of scary sometimes when you go over it, and if you saw a lot of cars and a bigger truck there, you're like, is it going to fall in like the one in Minneapolis did? Yeah, and maybe find the original agreement that was with the rail station, or the railways, with the upkeep of the bridge, and highlight those points that, you know, why is it an argument right now? And is it really that they just don't care because the trains can still get through? So who cares if people can get through the bridge? And then there have been other issues with that bridge before. So just a little kind of a short history thing and showing what the bridge looked like before, and why can't they restore it? Because it is a historical kind of thing. I don't think there's many swing bridges around in Canada anymore. Probably find that out really easily. Even that other bridge that's on Mission Island, the Jackknife Bridge too, it's pretty bad. I just drove by there the other day. So
Well, they don't even use it. They don't use that bridge anymore, just the trains.
Yeah.
You gotta go all the way around.
No, we drive. I've driven on that bridge.
The Jackknife? Closed now. It's closed. There's no
Since
ramp
when?
even to get up to the top.
Okay.
No, the
Okay.
other one.
Cutting off? Okay.
You may want to start with just kind of clarifying this bridge, because, you know, I don't know anything about it. And if you're reaching out to an audience beyond Thunder Bay, people won't know, you know, what does the bridge mean? What was its original purpose? And it's also an interesting symbol that a bridge, you know, you're bridging places and people. So you may want to look at just symbolic representation a little bit.
I have a picture that I drew for a class.
But maybe just clarifying the purpose of the bridge and why it was built in the first place, and why it's still.
Like this was when it first happened, but this was a class assignment that we had to show the issues. So like this one has like Europe on this side in the ground kind of thing, and Canada on this side, and all the different issues which have kind of like gone onto the crack that's in the broken bridge. It's not a picture of that bridge, but it was kind of like symbolizing all the issues that are going in there, like kind of thing, and how the two sides are kind of on different sides.
And you've got the Indigenous story, and is it between U.S. and Canada, or
no? It's just First Nations.
Just between the First Nations
and Thunder Bay.
Okay, well
Yeah.
that's big in itself.
Yeah.
Huge.
It was once referred to as the mission.
Right.
Fort William First Nation.
And so now the First Nation uses the bridge and the train, you said?
The trains use the bridge. Nobody else can use it. Just the trains right now.
And that sounds dangerous too.
Yeah,
But even before it broke, it was an issue. It was in bad shape. But also when the last time I was here 3 years ago or something, we drove over there, and it was like we were looking in the car. It was Yeah, I was
That's
so
weird.
shocked. Is that a weird thing or
That's
is
really
this
weird
happening?
thing, yeah.
So I don't know why that
You're
was. They said
suspicious
something
people.
about. Maybe I look really suspicious. So that wasn't a normal thing.
Not at all, no.
Okay, because that gave me an impression. I thought, oh my goodness, this is very extreme here. Okay, but I think it's like we're saying that the metaphor, and you've already explored it in that drawing. It's so powerful. It made me think too of like I think in the Detro film I used the treaty coin that has, and it was split in half at some point, and you know trying to get it together, but in fact one half doesn't even know the coin exists basically. So it's like a real struggle. So I guess I'm wondering, yes.
But it seems like if you, like I thought maybe even ask a few people in Thunder Bay, like,
That's what
you know, do you think it's important?
So you
Do they
think
even see the historical side of it? Just never mind the First Nations thing, but just it's a part of our history. It is a bridge that was used, and ships came in, ships came out. That bridge had to move.
So who is your audience?
Yeah,
Who do you want to love this film and
Yeah.
do you
Who are
want
you
to
talking
motivate
to?
them to do something? Or?
People in Thunder Bay.
Yeah, so you're
Because it
talking,
has been, is it now 3 years that bridge has
At
been
least.
out? Yeah.
yeah, that's what I also wanted to say. Who is your audience? And then if you really talk to Thunder Bay, it's really a different story than to the world, right? Because there are things people know here, and you have to decide yourself how much you want to give. Maybe it is important to even younger people in Thunder Bay to tell a history a little bit, you know? But then people are from here, so it's really important how you tell the story. If people are seeing it in Thunder Bay or you're talking to people in Toronto, you know, it's very different. So that's one thing that
But I think the history, probably even the ones in Thunder Bay, they don't know. So it's
Yeah,
probably
important.
Can maybe get
yeah.
even like catch both audiences, like ones from farther off too, because I think they need that. You need that introduction.
Yeah.
Some may say, "Oh yeah, I know that part,"
And
but
yeah.
in 5 minutes, it's going to
Yeah.
go from what they do know to what they don't know.
And I wanted to add another thing. I think powerful films, doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or 50 minutes, always have to ask the right, a question. You know, you don't have to answer it necessarily, you know, but ask. So, you know, if you build it up with giving some background about, you know, history and importance, but then not necessarily end it up with all the answers, but just ask a question.
Like the
That would
part
be good
about
enough.
what the CN rail says, but then not give the answer.
Exactly.
Just leave it
Yes.
And
there
the-
so
and I
that
think-
everybody can decide for themselves.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to say.
Yes.
So structurally, I think that's a really good way to go,
Yes.
because I always think, you know, at the end of the showing something, there's a question to start answering. The film doesn't have to do it, you know. So I think it's a good approach, and and it
It would
could be
cool
really.
if we had one of those drone things that could like drive
Oh,
right
that's
around.
true.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
quite possible. Right?
that's very possible.
Drone would be possible, and also if you're using Photoshop has a motion setup, so where you can do video kind of effect to your images, or if you have video, you can do like editing in there too, or some kind of special effects on that. Yeah, so technically, I think you can, it's achievable.
And another thing that I wanted to add, just for you to think of, is it going to be like an objective story that, you know, here are the facts, or are you going to tell it maybe from your own perspective or somebody else? Like, who's the point of view of the storyteller? Is this going to be yourself, somebody that you know from the community, or from Thunder Bay, or
Or a
is it just
bird.
or a bird, you know? Or just, you know, an official. Well, I mean, it's very important because, you know, especially in a show, but I think in any film, like who tells the story, where do you see it from, and if you're very clear about it in a nice way, I mean, not on your face, then you catch your viewer. You
And
know?
I think that's so important. And with a story like this that is quite emotional for people, I think that there's a tendency as the one telling it to think it has to be factual and the official correct version, but in fact you don't. As long as you keep your eye on the prize of what the real important question is, and you tell that, you make that question a kind of container for that question with your own voice.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to be the official historian about it.
Historian or even news report,
Yeah.
Because like a news
Yeah.
report, they have to be like not biased, supposedly. Of course, everybody is, but
Mhm.
so it's like the voice of God, we call it, right? But just think who is the voice you want to bring there, and then how the point of view comes through, and then you make your decisions.
And in gathering your preliminary research, like you were talking about, interviewing people, how they think, people in the First Nation, people on the street, that even if that doesn't make it into the film, it still backgrounds your project, and it helps you perhaps to raise some additional questions. And then later on, if you have it online, that might be another layer to, the website, or just to the sort of knowledge dissemination of what arose from this project, that it's never wasted. But it may not all have to be in the film either.
Yeah, but she's limited in the time she has.
Yeah,
so,
that's-
Yeah.
You're
but-
saying the
that,
right
but-
thing if it's a larger.
Yeah, but it might grow. It may end up, you might get a grant, and later after the workshop, or, it might, sounds like a great project, and you may want to carry it
But
forward.
Just do a good small one for
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
And then
For now,
Well, and
yeah.
this is an
Start small,
opportunity here
that really take
with
them
our
to-
2 days,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have to
Yeah.
concentrate now.
Yeah,
so
no, I know,
what you're
but-
saying is very good.
But projects have a way of going beyond, and growing, and maybe staying longer than you thought. So yeah, for now, say you were gonna do this already, maybe a few interviews, but, just keep in mind that any research can be revisited, if you expand the project in the future.
Okay, let's move on now. Okay, so, Sandy, you have something?
I have a poem. Anyway, I write poetry, and this poem was published in 3 different books, one in the States and one local, and the other one is the Northwestern Ontario Writers Workshop, their publication. And also right now they're considering it for a mental health tour, and this is plays and poetry songs to do with mental health. Anyway, it's called Let Winds Blow Through You, and it goes, let winds blow through you, push your worries away, let winds blow through you, bring hope today. Let winds blow through you, help you face your fears. Let winds blow through you, wipe away your tears. Let winds blow through you, quiet surrounding noise. Let winds blow through you, help you find joy. Let winds blow through you, massage and caress. Let winds blow through you, take away your stress. Let winds blow through you, conquer your pain. Let winds blow through you, make you whole again. Let winds blow through you, give peace and harmony. Let winds blow through you and set yourself free. And I wrote it for someone who has arthritis, and she was debilitated, and it's a guided imagery poem, to help her deal with her illness. So, anyway, I was just thinking for a short documentary like we're doing, it would be easy to, if it's not a windy day, you could set up a fan. But you could, collect images to go with the narration of the poem. So that was my idea. Just a thought.
Are you thinking that you would narrate it? That you would read it?
Well, whoever. My voice tends to sound like a little girl at times. I don't know if I could. Yes, I could narrate it. Yes, or someone else, whichever.
Would you consider adding text, like the poem as text over the images?
Oh yeah, you can put the text.
And sound effects with, You know, and this is a windy place, Thunder Bay.
Yeah.
Always I'm watching trees and, you know, and like images in nature with,
Well, we have had some very windy days recently.
and the sky is always changing rapidly.
Oh, yeah, the sky's always moving, so.
And we have the
clouds-
time-lapse workshop later, so that might be an element, a visual element. That
Yeah,
might,
you could do time lapse,
For-
set up your camera over a period of time.
for maybe a section or some of the lines in the poem. So within like a 1 or 2 minute piece, you could have a lot of rich visual material.
Yeah, especially that you have one sentence that repeats a lot.
Yeah.
So maybe you can find something that you would like to repeat also as an image.
Oh, I see.
You know, so
Yeah.
think about either the same image or something that develops in this image is, I don't know, light. And the light in this place is so amazing. And of course, I mean, the visuals are amazing. So just think about an image that you're connecting to that you would like maybe to repeat a few times in a different, slight way that can come and, you know, just play with your own poem.
Yeah, and this could work really nicely with animation. I'm imagining a kind of drawing, or maybe a silhouette of a person or something with wind going through it, or you could do something that, you know, uses other, like drawing or like still photographs, or even kind of a experimental approach, just working with images in paint, or because paint flows as well, like wind does. So it might be nice to do a little experimenting with materials that somehow work, even like you say, a fan with a cloth blowing in front of it or something. Just materials or grasses blowing in front. Just explore a number of materials and see what they, because sometimes you get something that looks quite blah in real life, but if you zoom in on it and get a fan going, it looks so magical with the right light. So,
I like the black grasses blowing in front. You can have them at the bottom of the page.
I'll get you a link to a person, a filmmaker. I met him in Montreal, and he is a filmmaker, photographer, and also an actor. And he sent me quite 3 or 4 years ago one of his projects, and it was a poem, and beautifully shot. So it might be something for you to look at and see how other people have done this kind of work. And the other thing I was thinking about was the dance.
Oh, dance would
Dance
be,
piece
dance performance.
that we showed in our festival last year.
Right,
When we
right.
got, but you
Yeah.
can send me that. And it's a beautiful visual piece, and something on that line might work too. And as Rebecca said, like animation, stop animation, drawing animation, something like that. Perfect.
But I think you don't need a lot of visual elements, like you may want to, you know, narrow it down to a few that you can then transform in editing. You can slow down motion or speed up motion, and so you may, and it has a sense of, because the lines repeat, so it may be nice to have a succession of images that also repeat, but each time are subtly transformed. And there's a sense of healing, and you know, you always want something that's sort of meditative also, in the mood.
And
Tone.
Nadine has done work, I think we showed you.
Oh, that's right.
Also, she has worked with another poet, and she's a filmmaker. And
You know
inhabited
Nadine? I think you saw Nadine's film. It was at opening night. Yes, yeah.
So 2 or 3 examples, and then like these kind of give you some kind of inspiration or things, how other people have done it and what you would do.
And I was wondering if any of you have experience with I found for preparing for especially this kind of a thing, that storyboarding
Yeah.
is like
about it.
essential, but also it's a way of coming up with working your ideas on paper.
It's very important, and that will help you to see what you're going to actually make. It's very important because there are lots of great ideas just coming, from here. You have to think and see some examples that that's what I'd like to do, and then try to break it to the images. This breakdown, storyboard will help you to know better what you want to do, but also how to make it. It's a kind of like the first practical tool to make a work plan. So it has two benefits. One is really artistic, but one is also practical and production.
And storyboarding helps you to understand what information you're putting in the frame. So there's that limiting device of, how close are you getting, how far, how wide, what kind of shot variety. And you don't have to draw them like perfectly. Storyboards aren't works of arts, they're pre-visualization tools. So you can just kind of, and it'll get you imagining how you then want to shoot what you've storyboarded.
And to plan it.
And also helps when you have a storyboard, when you show it to other people, say film camera person, actor, it's a visual kind of language. So sometimes when we explain our project, it's very hard. It's in our mind. It's very hard for other people to understand. Visual helps them understand what we are thinking. And it doesn't need to be, as she said, it doesn't need to be perfect drawing. You can also use photographs too. So use photographs of anything in your storyboard.
Yeah.
I noticed that because for me as a filmmaker, I'm working on filters for like stock footage that I capture. It's always good to add different special effect filters too as well. That way you'll get a mood. Yeah.
Okay, so let's hear from somebody else. Do you have one? Brad? Okay.
Really quickly, I was taken with Dennis's idea about the roads yesterday, and I was thinking about it, and I thought that maybe it could be okay, it's about the roads. Everybody always complains about the roads in Thunder Bay, but I was thinking it could be sort of a way to talk about. I mean, I love living here. There's nowhere else in the world I'd rather live than Thunder Bay. It's great, but the roads are horrible, and the political decision-making process is dysfunctional, to say the least. Things get done here, and everybody just goes, "How did that happen?" And so it may be. I mean, there's debates about everything. If something good is going to happen here, they got to fight about it for months and years. The community auditorium, what a brouhaha that was. Now they want this event center, and people are going, it's just a glorified hockey rink. Why are we spending our tax dollars on that when the roads are such a mess? So it could be, you could talk about the roads, but make it at the end like a little joke about the whole way that things get done in Thunder Bay. And the roads are just a metaphor for that, that everybody knows about. So that's just my 2 cents to your great idea. And now another
How would
idea.
you do it, though?
Well, I don't know. It's Dennis's idea, so I'll let him run with it.
I'll sell it to you.
Oh, okay. I'll buy you a cup of coffee.
To just start shooting, the places we're talking about, and you can make the project from the point of view of a car maybe, or somebody that goes on the road that, so you can shoot it from this perspective, just an idea, but just think about who experienced it. So
Well, I have to say, just a little example with, I know Damien Gilbert, he's a local filmmaker, and I think he's like the first person I knew who had a GoPro. And the first thing he did was he stuck it on the dash of his car and drove around and then did like a high-speed kind of animation of driving through the city. And it was just really cool and fun. And he posts this stuff on Facebook. And then recently, over the past few months, what he did was he just used it as like a dash cam, and he caught the horrible drivers in Thunder Bay, and then he would post it, and like there would be like 1,000 people that would watch it and just comment on that. And it was like everybody has an opinion about driving. We do it all the time, and people barely walk in this city. They have to get in their big truck and drive. So
Yeah, a block
there's
to
lots
somewhere.
of
Yeah.
potential for that. And then Curtis is coming in later this afternoon to do the camera. But that, to me, that seems like a fun kind of project to think about different ways of shooting it and capturing it. Because you see those, those time lapse where the traffic is going like just brightly colored lights flowing through, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's sort of crying out though too, to have a website or Facebook page where people could post their webcam things, right?
Oh yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah, this is multimedia.
Yeah.
yeah,
And I had that thought too,
Or
like
the
you
career
appropriate
project.
the Facebook info.
yes. Oh, is there one already? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there is a.
Yeah, Thunder Bay Bad Drivers.
Oh, okay.
What is it called, Ella?
It's been
Bad
done.
Drivers or?
What was the name of
Bad
it?
Park
I think it's Thunder Bay Bad Drivers or.
It's
Look it up.
actually Thunder Bay Parking Jobs.
Yeah, that's what it is.
But you could get the point of view of like a pedestrian as well, or a bicyclist, and
Yeah, that's
you
what I
know, other
meant,
people
like-
who use the road, but who are kind of excluded from
Take your own-
access due to these bad
You
drivers.
take your own life in your hands if you
Oh,
try
yeah.
biking
Yeah.
in Thunder Bay.
But then there's been a whole movement with the city and everything creating bike
Bike
They
paths.
lanes.
canceled it.
On-
They canceled that open road thing this year.
Too dangerous. Okay.
Initially,
That
I'm
sounds-
just gonna add to it, because initially I saw it as I mentioned yesterday briefly, just about horrid conditions. And then it occurred to me to tie it into the event center because of the whole, like I used to be quite an advocate for that event center until I started really seeing the costs and the failing infrastructure in our city and just like where are our priorities. So, but I like what you said about the cyclists too, because that occurred to me, like if it's just around cars and that, like why are we spending so much time in our cars anyway? So, but it does affect cyclists and to a lesser extent pedestrians with dangerous sidewalks and potholes and whatnot. So, but it's the bigger picture is just the failing infrastructure that, and where's the city's priorities kind of thing. And I also thought about just, that Go Public that the CBC does, like that kind of thing is almost like a shaming campaign. So that might be another angle, is like shaming the city into taking action. Mobilizing people, so call it action mobilization, not knowledge mobilization, to do something about it, and the city to start responding a little quicker.
What if you took it as a conspiracy against cyclists?
Yeah, well, humor in it is, I went to a session with Michael Moore and he talked about, well, he said if you're making documentaries and you're not using humor, you're just making medicine that's like, you have to give it. But I don't necessarily agree with that, but the whole thing of using humor to your max. And you're a funny guy.
You could also have somebody like, when it's raining and they hit one of those potholes and there's like a cyclist who gets splashed, and then like somebody walking and also gets like, that when you hit those really big ones and the water just goes and just gets them totally drenched. It's like, why?
Ron, did you have a comment?
Well, I just suggest for that kind of thing that you read about Saul Alinsky. He was a radical in the U.S. in the 1960s, and he came up with something, you can find it online, it's rules for radicals. One of the rules is you have to humiliate your opposition. There's no defense if they're humiliated.
So, for example, Kodak apparently didn't have any people of African descent working in its flagship store in Rochester, New York. So we organized a campaign where every person of African descent and that lived anywhere near Rochester went to the store one day to buy things, ask questions, and just clog the store up and put them out of business. Right? He organized a shit-in at O'Hare National Airport. So people sat in the stalls and read novels and let chaos reign in the airport. He did enough of those things that he just had to threaten crazy ideas, and people said, okay, we'll listen to you. So I think you can do the same sort of thing with film. If you can, it's all these ideas you're talking about, but and as you say, action, but I'd say humiliation, mobilization, right? You make them look bad, and there's no response, right? People like it, it's humorous, unless you have to go to the bathroom, and everybody can understand.
So are you proposing creating a kind of performative action and then filming it, documenting it?
Or whatever, yeah, something.
Oh, that's a cool
Lots
idea.
of possibilities. We've got 20-some people here. You're all creative people. I'm sure somebody can come up with something ridiculous that's doable that can go viral. Or a group of you can get together and do that.
Did you ever hear about the hamburger letters?
No.
The guy, I don't know what his real name is, his father, Guido Sarducci, who was on Saturday Night Live years ago. Anyway, he sat down and started writing letters to McDonald's, and just ridiculous letters to their PR people. And it was started as a joke. He just wanted to get a free hamburger, and it just went on and on and on, and it's hilarious. And he turned it into a book.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just asking questions about their hamburgers.
It's like the time waster letters. There's a guy who published a book called Time Waster Letter, and he would just write to any organization very sort of semi-seriously and then engage them, and then they would respond back, and then he kept
One
writing.
of them was to the Aerial Photographers Association of Britain, and he wrote to tell them about his collection of aerials, photographs of aerials on houses, cars. Anyhow, engage them till they finally quit. Those are the kinds of sort of direct action things that new media, multimedia lends itself to. And don't get arrested. Right? know your limits.
Okay, so now, anyone else? Clarence, have you thought a bit more about your Stompin' Tom story? Or is that a...
viable to do it right now, but
Yeah.
It's another one that I want to do this summer. I'll share it with you anyway.
Okay.
You always hear these residential school stories, sort of dismal stories. But my mom went to one that was in Kenora, near Kenora, called Macintosh. She had lost both her parents when she was 6 years old. So she was orphaned at 6 years old. And they sent her to Macintosh. She's Cree from James Bay, but they sent her to a Ojibwe one near Kenora. And that particular one, they had a nun who taught Cree. You know how you always hear that they weren't supposed to speak their language. They actually had a nun who taught Ojibwe, sorry. And then so she grew up from the time she was 6 till she was 18 with the nun. So she's like a saint, and she's 83 right now. But for the longest time, she wondered where her parents were buried. And we have a genealogist in our family. It was actually from Manitowoc, actually. And so he found the grave recently. And it was just this spring when we were on our way to a wedding in Toronto. We stopped in Hillsbury where the grave is. It's an unmarked grave. So, and it was quite a windy day. I took some film of it where we actually went to the gravesite. We found the gravesite, and like I said, it was nighttime. It was just turning dusk, and it's a beautiful shot of her because she put on a blanket, which she didn't have a jacket, so she put on a blanket, and it's blowing in the wind. And it was quite a windy day, and we found the gravesite, and so I asked her, well, how do you feel about this? And she goes, and she didn't say much. She just said, well, I'm glad I found you. That's going to be the crux of the film. But so we got a headstone.
and we're gonna go place it there at the end of July, so. And it'll be a short film, but I think it's kind of powerful, the images that I did already get. And, there'll be an interview in there too, so, with her.
And this nun is still alive, the one who taught her?
I actually took some film footage when I was in Winnipeg, so I got that file footage too, where she went back and talked to the nun that raised her, basically, from time she was 6 to 18. And we found her and she was like 96 years old or something like that. So I got that footage too on files.
With both of them in the interview?
Yeah. We were just talking casually at the nun's house, so yeah. So
Do
so
you
I
still
got that
have
footage.
access to the nun? Could you go back?
No,
and ask her
she
any
was
more
97 at
questions?
that time, and that was like 1999 or something like that.
Oh,
So
okay.
she's probably
Yeah.
passed away. So, but I got that file footage. I made sure I got that file footage anyway.
Wow, that's great.
So yeah.
So
It sounds to me like you have
almost finished. But how long do you imagine,
Yeah.
and how much is in there
No,
in
and I
terms
got
of
a lot of file
backstory?
footage of her at school too. So yeah, a lot of, it was rare that we took photographs in those days of residential school, but I got quite a bit of file footage of, I mean, just still images.
Photos.
I just
Oh,
bought
still
it.
images, it's good
Yeah,
enough, huh?
so I bought it, 4600 DPI scanners, so, because they're only 5 by 3 inch pictures, so I'm gonna load them up. Yeah.
So you're gonna focus mainly on that, or you're gonna have backstory of your?
Well, I have a little backstory with her, like an interview.
And who you are, are you going to be in?
I think I might include myself as a narrator.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Tell the story
Yeah.
as she told it to me.
And you'll go back to the gravesite or the
Yeah, we're going
show
to
that, like,
July
just
26th, I believe.
the landscape of that site would be kind of interesting for narration and just kind of a
Yeah, well,
reflective
that's the original
element.
stuff that we took in May when we went to the wedding. When we first found the gravesite. So I got that footage already. But then the actual going there at the end of July. So when we visited, we put the headstone. But we still haven't found her mother. So that's a piece of the puzzle that's missing. So. She went be up in Pagua River, which was a military site, Northwest Military, near Hearst. So, but it's, again, another unmarked grave, so it'd be hard to find it.
Somebody has the record of it, the little tag, right?
Someone
The number
must
on the
have,
tag, and somebody is in possession of that.
It was a military base, so probably have to go through Canadian Armed Forces or something to find out where she's buried. The mother anyway. Like my mom was getting up in age too, so she would like to have those answers, right? So that's my pitch for that.
Yeah, that sounds like a very powerful.
Very powerful, yeah. But I have a feeling, like, how long do you think it is? Like, just, what's your sense about it?
I don't know if I'd make it a TV hour, like 47 minutes or something. And fill up that
Oh,
much
that's
time.
long? That's long?
Or maybe it might be just a half hour, 27 minutes for TV or something like that. Maybe 10.
If you had a longer piece, you may have to, maybe other people have gone on this kind of quest to find their
Yeah, we lost her.
people's graves and.
My aunt who went to school with her, we just lost her, so she would have been a big puzzle, but she passed last year, so yeah. 'Cause, she was the actual one who brought my mom home when she was 18. And of course she met my dad in a little town called, or little reserve called Rockadega, where Nick was on. So I'd have to narrate that part because my dad also passed last year.
But there may be other people in the community who, or maybe, you know, if you wanted to expand it, that if you wanted to make a longer piece, for instance, that.
Well, my genealogy person in our family, he was actually raised in my grandma's home in Rock Bay. He's the Iron Man. He's the one who found the grave, so maybe that's.
He might be an interesting person to interview, yeah, in more detail.
He did our whole genealogy back to the 1600s or something. So.
Oh, wow, that's lucky.
So yeah, so that might be a thought that didn't occur to me until now.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
There's a larger history, a larger social history with your project. So many people have that loss.
Well, yeah, because like I said, a lot of the residential schools are this one, puts a new twist on it, so.
Mhm.
It just seems to me that that contrast is sort of important, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know somebody that was working on, and I don't remember the name of the school now, but the residential school at Sault Ste. Marie. And he went to the little cemetery that they had there for kids. And it's still there. And, you know, the grass is 2 feet high and, you know, it's sort of an abandoned little piece of land. And, you know, I think that if there's a way of incorporating.
I know the school you're talking about. Actually, I got a lot of file footage from Macintosh from that school.
Yeah.
Because they have an archive there, Catharines North.
Yeah, and they closed it, but for a while, this guy I know had complete access to it. And, anyhow, I know that there's still a small cemetery, maybe somebody's cleaned it up a little bit, but it was a pretty sad little place, and we have photos, I think, too, but I could put you
Well, they had a big
in
thick
contact
book
with
of
them.
Macintosh photos.
Okay.
And I got the book. But, I don't know what the
Perfect.
original photos are.
Yeah, yeah.
They're big enough to scan and utilize.
But anyhow, he's used those archives and all that, and he might have some idea for you if you want. So,
Just thought,
but then
Okay.
there's lots of residential schools and lots of cemeteries associated with them, unfortunately. So.
Okay. Is anyone else? Okay, great.
I tried to think of an idea that was local, but I don't have a good sense yet of the city, so I'll just tell you the idea that I have for like a small, maybe 5-minute story based in Toronto. And I came to the idea because I used to work really early in the morning, like 3 in the morning I had to get up for work. And in my neighborhood, which is Kensington Market, it's kind of a unique neighborhood in Toronto. And like with a lot of history and lots of sort of immigration stories there. And so I would wait to go to work, and then there'd be people looking through my recycling for beer bottles or alcohol bottles. And it just was fascinating to me that it'd be winter time, any time of the year, but like especially like in the middle of the night, winter time, and there'd be people. And in this neighborhood, particularly, it tends to be sort of elderly Chinese people. And then as I like sort of, it's all once I sort of started looking, it's all I can see, and to me it's this, I'm kind of fascinated by this like, this sort of world that's happening, like they know each other and this whole community, but then there's very little interaction with the actual people living in the neighborhood, so it's kind of this like, this they're there, but we don't really, like you say hello, but you don't really know their stories, so I'm sort of interested in learning a bit of their story. And so what I was thinking is to see if I can maybe, it's a bit difficult because how do you approach, like I'm curious to learn about some of the people, but I don't want to like impose or sort of take their story. So but if I could sort of establish a relationship with somebody, then to see if I can maybe just follow them through a day or through a week, and kind of go out and sort of just see the city, see that neighborhood from their perspective for that amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I'm thinking.
Because I filmed with a group of elderly Chinese folks at Bathurst and Spadina. They were selling vegetables on the street illegally, and inspectors were coming in, this was years ago, coming in and chasing them away. And so the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty, OCAP, was working with them and asked me to come and film for a number of days in order to keep them safe. Because when the inspector sees a camera, they run away. So I did that, and I learned a lot about their stories. And a lot of them have very wealthy children that just don't help them out at all. And they're just trying to find a way to get by. And it was so moving. When I finished, they came with a big bag of vegetables. That's all they had to pay me with. And that was my payment for the job, and it was just so sweet. But I'm pretty sure that OCAP still has relationships with that group. So if you call John Clark or email, I can give you his email, at OCAP, and he can probably help introduce you, because there's a translation thing. A lot of them don't speak English, but OCAP has people who can translate as well, and introduce you. Yeah. It sounds like a really nice project.
Well, why don't we touch on the issue of ethics and permissions and all that kind of stuff. If you maybe have like just a sample, an example or two, or
Well, I can just go
yeah.
on. I'm sorry, but in fact, I've never done anything with that footage because I felt that the relationship with the children and all of that stuff was so complex and emotional that I would have to spend a lot of time kind of being sure that they really wanted this to be seen publicly. Anybody in the footage would have to, I would need a lot of help making sure that they really understood what could, because with, they're just possible now implications with the internet. When things go up and people see stuff, like if you saw your mom going through a garbage can, it might be very difficult for you and for the rest of your family and for her. And so it's like, it's difficult. So I think it's either you find some way to film so that people aren't identifiable, or you work with them so that you get to know them so well that you really do all understand what can happen and what the implications are.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When I first thought about this idea, I was thinking to make it a bigger story, so not just to focus on Kensington, and because it's sort of this idea of like recycling and like I at first I started quite big and like many people, and not just to focus on that particular community. But then now I'm kind of more drawn to the idea again of keeping it very small and maybe only finding one person and just kind of without much, I mean them talking with translation, but without much else, like just kind of the visual of it, and not go too deep into their family story, just kind of give an impression almost.
Yeah. And you can also kind of abstract it in various ways. You can shoot against the sun or something so that it's not shadowy and you don't really recognize. You can, again, sort of, if you are in it, if it's you watching them, then that gives the opportunity for your voice to be there rather than theirs, perhaps, or perhaps their voice is not actually their recorded voice, but text, or again, you can remove it and abstract it, and especially if you're talking about a larger issue, not really that individual, then I think you would like to probably abstract it more and make it a larger thing.
And there's other, people in the city that kind of depend on bottle collecting to supplement their incomes. And every time I bring my wine bottles back to the beer store, in my neighborhood, there's a homeless guy who, if we saw him, we'd just give our bottles over. But sometimes people come in with like huge shopping carts full of bottles, and you may want to, like, in regard to the images, maybe focus on the objects of that, and the object of those piles of bottles and a shopping cart filled, and just on the street kind of thing, without having human characters necessarily. That and you may, when you talk to the people at OCAP, they may have a voice that might express something narratively that you can use over your more abstracted images that would still make the point. And what Rebecca was saying about shooting against the light and just figures in a landscape that might protect identities as well.
And maybe it could become like a story of how you became aware of poverty. I mean, most people, poverty is invisible to them. It's all around us, but really it's so invisible and just in our, and that could be part possibly of the story of you, all of a sudden, because you had to get up at 3 a.m, then all of a sudden something that was maybe you just passed by, you didn't really think about it too much in your life, and And then all of a sudden it was like, oh.
You could have a series of sort of early morning diary communications, voiceover things or
Yeah.
something about your own sort of evolving. That might be
And
nice.
the sound too is quite, like, because it's so quiet at that time of night, and then you just like you hear the sound of the.
Yeah, sound could be
Yeah,
researched.
yeah.
The
So,
bottle
you know,
Recycling,
sound,
yeah.
sound is really can be, you know, a big part of your show because, yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah.
And night photography can be very compelling, and with digital, there's ways, like if you include a light source somewhere within the frame, it'll brighten up the image, and often, there is lighting, there's street lighting, and, just without having to bring in any lighting, just remember to always include some kind of light source within the scene, or you can always just light something with a flashlight or some simple way of, a pile of and stuff that we just pass by, it's just garbage, but, to someone else it has value and, sustenance.
Can I just say, before I guess we break for coffee, should be close, but, one little comment, and that is that it's an awful lot of work to be poor. And, just say, like, well, you were getting up to go for a job, they were already up before you, working, right? And when you went home that night, or whenever you went home, they were probably still on the job, right? So, with this kind of story, I think that's, an important sort of consideration. I don't know how you work it in, but just that it's, I think the poorer you are, the harder you work, and I think that's pretty much universal. So.
Okay, I just have one, just a question. Sorry, Satini, I was not paying attention to the comments here, but Satinia had an idea. I think about, maybe this goes back to the driving in Thunder Bay, but what about including some images of the recent flood with people canoeing in the streets, or the car that ended up in the sinkhole that had opened? Could those images be included?
There's another 4 or 5 sinkholes by the bus stop. Like we saw like 4 in a bus, like by bus stops on Memorial.
Sinkholes.
Right? Bus stop there, the bench there, hole.
And then Mary just had a question too. Is should they come up with a project? Well, I think that you guys can. We're going to all take a coffee break right now, and I'll just so you can sort of see me. Anyway, we'll break for coffee now, but then maybe just before we come back up, we can try to hook up so that we can see you guys via Google Chat if you have cameras on your, and then if you have an idea, if you don't, that's okay, but just we could get a couple of comments from you instead of me reading. And but if you have an idea, and if you want to try to do something there with whatever resources that you have where you are, Mary, do a project with your daughters. So anyways, we're gonna sign off now, and then we'll be back in 15 minutes. And meanwhile, I'll try to contact you, even just the old-fashioned way with a telephone. Okay, thanks.